Hey guys, welcome to General Query. This is Fonz. I go by he, him, and his.
Hi guys, and this is Zuki, and I go by she, her, and hers. Welcome to another episode of General Query. How are we doing? How is everyone?
We're doing. We are
We're
doing.
Yeah, we're doing. Yeah, I agree. I think yeah, we're doing. I mean, things are fine, I guess, relative to everything else,
Right.
but it's been heavy.
Do you remember last episode? I was like, oh yeah, I'm listening to this new podcast, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so, literally, the episode that came out this week, they were like, life is shit or life is hard right now. And I was like, that sounds way too familiar.
That sounds very real. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
My God. Something I didn't tell you off microphone. So yesterday we went out, right? And then someone came up to me and they're like, hey, I love your guys' podcast. Like, it's so much fun. And I was like, I haven't heard that in a long time, especially because I haven't been out in a long time. But it just felt cool to hear it from.
Oh, lovely.
But I'm assuming was a new listener because I don't think I've ever
told them.
Bumped into him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, kind listener. We appreciate it. We're working on making it better and better every time.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah. No,
we're working on going back to our routine. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know, like, in the last week's episode, we were like, guys, we're trying to keep it cute. We're trying to keep it light. But this week's episode,
the amount of delusion can only last so long.
Yes. Which is, as you guys saw, we posted basically Trixie and Katya's snippet of what Fonza's and our relationship looks like on a daily basis. Like, just delulu. Constant delulu. But so like Fon says, like, the delusion can only last for so long, and then we just have to sort of succumb to the madness for a little bit.
Right.
And just be a part of it, be one with it, you know?
Yeah.
So
you kept saying Delulu, and I think Delulu is the name of J-Lo's wine or something. Or brand, that's what it's called, Delulu.
Okay, I'm sorry. Quick caveat. Okay, and I know I'm going to have some of our listeners that may come for me because I know some people love J-Lo. But if you haven't seen her Netflix documentary, oh my God. It doesn't surprise me that she named her wine Delulu, because let me tell you something. If you feel like you're delusional about your space in life, and that's the thing, most of the people that we know and love are delusional in the sense that they don't realize how amazing they are, right? Like, they're delusional that way. J-Lo is delusional in the complete polar opposite way, in that she thinks she really is truly hot shit and she can out-sing Adele, okay? Which is very uncomfy for me.
Yeah.
Just in general. And so, yeah, y'all, like, watch J-Lo's documentary if you just want to feel really safe.
Is that the one where, like, she talks shit about Shakira and the Super Bowl?
100%. Yes. And how she feels like she's like, and then I love it in the documentary. She tries to flip it. She's like, it's just because they don't think one Latina is enough. And I'm like, no, that's not, let's not try to do the Latina thing, bitch. You can't sing, Jennifer, okay? Like, let's be fucking very real. So she is, my favorite part is, she's talking to her assistant, and she's talking about, like, certain people that are going to be in the documentary talking about her, or people that they're trying to get. And she's going through a list of people, and her assistant, her team is like, no, they said no. They said no. They also said no. And it's just list after list. And I'm just like, you let this be published? Are you kidding me? I would be like, ooh, let's cut this completely. No. So that's what I'm saying. You want to feel sane and you want to see what Delulu actually looks like? Watch that. There's a really cool part. Oh, tell me. Go ahead.
She's also, like, very Delulu in the way where, like, I love when she does interviews in Spanish because like she swears she's bilingual, right? And
He
then
swears.
you
Yeah.
hear her conversations in Spanish, and you're like, "The fuck are you saying? I thought you were Puerto Rican." She's like Puerto Rican by blood. Um, and then you hear Ben Affleck speaking Spanish. I was like,
Yeah. 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 And that's embarrassing.
that is embarrassing, especially because she's like all Latina and like, oh, I'm bilingual. I'm like, bitch, you are not bilingual.
There is this iconic scene that I think isn't talked about enough in that documentary that you all need to. I'll post it. I'll post it. Okay, because it goes with the theme. She is post workout and she's like taking her hair out a little bit, like she's like taking out the clip and she's like fluffing up her hair, and it's clearly like just her natural hair, right? And she goes, shakes it out. She's like, oh. She like leans down all dramatically and on this bench, and she's like, yeah, I used to wear my hair like this all the time. I have a better Bronx accent than she does, so give me credit. But anyways, she's like, I used to wear my hair like this all the time when I lived on the block in the Bronx. And I'm like, is this bitch trying to make like Requiem for Jenny from the block? Like, I don't understand.
Right.
But it's just like, it's the whole picture. Like she's leaning down and she's like, yeah, I'm just from the block. And I'm like, Jennifer,
Right.
no, sis. It's,
yeah.
I mean, chef's kiss. I'm telling you.
I love that she continues. I love, first of all, that we're talking shit about J-Lo, and we might have some J-Lo fans listening to us, but I really don't care. Anyway, yeah. I saw this TikTok the other day, and it was someone who went to, I don't know if it was like middle school or high school with Jennifer Lopez.
Uh-huh.
And she was like, J-Lo, you are not from the block. Like, you went to school with this person. Like, your parents paid very expensive tuition for you to go to school. And she's like, this whole idea of, like, you're from the Bronx and from the block and from the ghetto, whatever, like, that is not you. She's like, stop selling that. You're a liar. And I was like, oh. So, yeah.
She said what she said.
J-Lo from the Jello. J-Lo from the block is not from the block.
No, I mean, absolutely fucking crazy. I'm just like, dude, like...
Yeah.
Girl.
Delulu, for sure.
Delulu.
I'm going to look it up. I think it is Delulu, but her wine is something like that. Delulu, Delala, something.
Yeah. That's the thing. I love to watch it. I love to see it. It's very entertaining. So go watch a documentary on Netflix. Do yourself a favor. It's like just a boost of serotonin, and it just makes you feel a lot better about your life.
Speaking of watching shows,
yeah.
Have you seen Mary and George?
Who?
Mary and George on Starz?
No.
Okay. So there's only 2 episodes out. I'll have to like send you my link or whatever. And it's actually really great. So Julianne Moore is on it.
Ooh, yeah. Okay.
And I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it at some point. We did an Oscar episode, like what? 1,
the
2,
beginning.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so she's one of my favorites, and she is amazing in that show. Like, speechless. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good show. 2 episodes in, so you guys can totally catch up. It is very good. So far, so good. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. Yeah. No, I'll watch that for sure. Yeah. So again, in the thread of delusion, what we wanted to talk about in this week's episode was the loneliness epidemic. And once again, I know we said we're not going to cover, or we're going to try to avoid depressing topics, but Fonz and I by now, this is going to be, I think, episode 47 or something. What you came here for, okay?
Oh my God. Almost episode 50. Are we going to do like a little Q&A?
Oh yeah. I think it's going to be like episode 50 extravaganza. Like, it's going to be a whole thing. I think we should be in costume. Yeah. We'll workshop it. Anyways.
That would be cool.
That would be
for you and I.
for us. Yeah. So obviously, I'm sure you all have seen like, oh, there's a loneliness epidemic. People are so lonely. Like, how are we going to do to fix it? So we wanted to like talk to you guys about it a little bit, but also it actually works out perfectly because Bonds, for once, isn't all too familiar with the topic, which is great because you're really going to get his unfiltered thoughts
opinion,
on the whole thing. So really quick, I want to show you, and I'll post the link in the show notes to the article, but this is from NPR, and it says, America has a loneliness epidemic, right? And basically the idea is that there's an epidemic of loneliness in the United States. I'm still very unclear as to how they're measuring this, but it appears that there has been research that says that lacking connection can increase the risk for premature death to levels comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, according to a new advisory from the U.S. Surgeon General. So the report says that even before the pandemic, about half of U.S. adults reported experiencing measurable levels of loneliness. So this was not the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic exacerbated it.
Yeah.
But this was happening before, right?
Yeah.
So, and this report warns of the physical consequences of poor connection, including a 29% increased risk of heart disease, a 32% increased risk of stroke, and a 50% increased risk of developing dementia for older adults.
Wow.
And the Surgeon General states, it's hard to put a price tag, if you will, on the amount of human suffering that people are experiencing right now.
That's insane.
So it's insane, right? So thoughts? What comes to mind, Fonz?
Yeah, so as you were reading that, I actually remembered this little clip from a show I'm watching. And one of the guys is married to someone. I guess they just got married like 3 years ago or whatever. It's like a reality show. But anyway, there's a clip where he mentions being with you makes me feel so lonely. So like as you were reading that, like that makes perfect sense because he also talks about like how he feels like he's always misunderstood or whatever by his wife. So
yeah,
obviously red flag, right? Like they're definitely not okay. But
sure,
reading that kind of reminded me of like, especially since we're talking about loneliness, like you don't have to be alone to be lonely.
And you just literally hit the nail on the head on something super important from the Surgeon General. Let me read you this quote. You're going to die. He says, you can feel lonely even if you have a lot of people around you, because loneliness is about the quality of your connections.
Yep.
Which is literally what you just said. Yeah.
Yeah.
You 100%. Can feel lonely in a crowd of people.
Yeah. I think, and I mean, props to us, but I think that's why you and I, and I'm talking for both of us, but correct me if I'm wrong, we are not people of like massive circles or people of like massive amounts of friends.
Yeah.
We're people of like select few friends who are like really close to you, and then like, yeah, we have acquaintances that we, like to hang out with or whatever, but like, I can literally count my friends with one hand or two fingers. And I think it goes back to that.
We love a two-fingered friend. Yeah.
Yeah. It goes back to like how we realized a long time ago that, at least for me, it was kind of like, even when you and I used to hang out, with massive crowds and whatever, like, it was lonely sometimes because at the end of the day, guess who would go home and just feel empty? Because I just had, party friends.
Absolutely. No. Definitely. I agree. I think you're right. Like the quality of our connections has decreased massively. I think.
Oh yeah.
I think.
Do you think a lot of it has to do with social media and like being influenced by technology?
You know what? Yeah, like obviously here at General Query, we try to be like as original, if you will, in like how we think about things. But and I don't want to fall into the whole trap of like, oh, social media is so evil kind of shit, whatever. Because I do think that social media can offer a certain degree of connection or perhaps community for folks. We won't call it connection, but we'll call it community, right?
Right.
Like the lovely people that listen to our podcast and that follow us on Instagram or any of our socials, there's a sense of community there because they know we're going to talk about topics that either they're interested in, may not be interested, but never been heard of, but most importantly, we're a queer safe space, right?
Right.
You can come here and they know that they're not, going to be listening to some nonsense about their personhood or how they don't deserve to be treated like human beings, right? Like this is safe space for our queer folks. And so in that regard, there's like a sense of community in social media where you can almost handpick those communities that you belong to and that you want to see on your feed, right?
Right.
So like I think there's that with social media, but the downside of that is that it's hard to achieve quality connection through your phone. It just is, right? And again, everything goes through a filter. Everything goes through everything. Like I will say one of the things that I made a conscious effort to do, like literally a couple of days ago, was my first time posting my face on Instagram, on our Instagram in a very long time. And it was like showing me all these filters that I could put on the picture. And I'm going through the filters and I'm like, holy shit, like that doesn't even look like me. You know what I mean? Like it started to get really crazy. And of course I was tempted. I was like, oh my God, look at how cute I look. You know what I mean? But I was like, no, like don't, you know what I mean? And so it's almost immediate, right? That thing where you can put a veneer over yourself and over your life immediately. And I'm like, no, these are our General Query peeps. They don't give a fuck. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm just uploading the episode. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not a thing. And so I think, social media, I think it's a double-sided blade, babe, where you can find community, but I don't know that you can find connection in social media.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
What do you think?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I do love that you distinguish like the community versus like how toxic it can be. Because you're right, you can find a safe space for sure. Speaking of loneliness and the queer community, I think a lot of our listeners can relate to the fact that as queer people, we do go through periods of loneliness. Like, I don't want to say more so than straight people because I don't know, I can't relate. But
you don't have the numbers. Yeah.
Exactly. But I think in general, it is very lonely to be queer overall. Because when I look back at my life, like growing up, you go through this period of like self-discovery, right? And so like that is very lonely because typically you don't want to out yourself to your family if you're not sure. And then you also don't want to out yourself because you don't know what their reaction might be. So like there's that period when like you start that self-discovery and then that period when you're like, well, should I do it? Should I not do it? And then once you do happen to come out of the closet, like, and you don't know people's responses, there is another period of loneliness because you typically, and I hope not a lot of our listeners can relate, but I'm pretty sure they can, you typically don't find that circle of trust that you would want when coming out, you know? And so that's another period of loneliness. And I'm sure a lot of our gay listeners know this, but when we do go through our whore phase, that is lonely as fuck. Like
the whore face is lonely? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm talking by experience because like when I used to whore around endlessly and have like, you know, and I'm being very raw right now, but like pun intended. I used to maybe have like, you know, 3 or 4 people, sometimes even like 6 people in one day. And I would still feel empty at the end of the night. I would still like go home and be like, I feel disgusting and lonely. So that's another period of feeling lonely and empty.
Sure.
And then as I get older, yes, I'm very lucky to have a great partner, but I do see it reflected in other people where, like, as they grow older, their loneliness increases because not only do they not want to settle, which is great, don't settle, but they also like don't want to push through anything. So like they build up this wall, this boundary, and then they self isolate themselves. So that's another period of loneliness.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think you just hit, I think, on a huge issue when it comes to interpersonal relationships. Like, I think even that applies, Fonz, to like friendships and like not even just partner relationships or friendships too, in that I think, are at a point where we are so ill equipped to have relationships with other human beings that we think that if they are not absolutely 100% what we need them to be 100% of the time, we don't think it's worth it. We don't think it's worth the struggle. We don't think it's worth telling your friend, hey, you hurt my feelings. Hey, whatever. Hey, what's this about? Hey, we don't think communication is worth the trouble anymore. And I think that's a huge, I think you're right. Because you're right. As you get older, yes, you do understand yourself so much better and you do get choosier and more picky, which is great. But then that can also be a trap, right?
Yeah.
In which you may be alienating folks that you just need to tell them, hey, you approached me about this way. I didn't like that. Can we work on it? Now, if that person obviously tells you no, then okay, then fuck you.
Right.
Easy, done.
Respectfully,
fuck you. But some people are worth the trouble, y'all.
Yeah.
They are, and so, and again, not all of us are perfect, right? So,
and that's the thing. Like, I think that's where the whole giving up and not trying it comes in, because like you don't really know who's worth it.
You don't.
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah.
You don't. No, and that's absolutely where it gets hard. So yeah, and it's interesting because according to this research, speaking of age, it says across age groups, people are spending less time with each other in person than 2 decades ago. The advisory reported that this was most pronounced in young people aged 15 to 24 who had 70% less social interaction with their friends. Guys, these numbers are like jarring, right?
Yeah.
Like when it's phrased this way, and it says the researcher said that many young people now use social media as a replacement for in-person relationships, and this often meant lower quality connections.
Yeah.
So
I was about to say that actually. Like, obviously, social media has a lot to do with it, and I think in that whole community thing, I think it's more our age. I want to say where we find a voice in a community versus like the newer generations that they want to fit in. It's more of they just want to be part of this influencer culture, and it's not about the connections, it's not about the community, it's just about the likes.
Yeah, it's and you know what I think what that links to too, Fonzie, is like this artificial validation, right?
Oh yeah.
In that, and I think that's important to talk about really quickly when we talk about loneliness, is that validation is internal, guys. It's you. Like you. And the reason why it matters so much that validation is personal and internal is that no one can take it away from you. That's very important, right? Because when you place your validation on others' views of you, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Because that's going to change with the fucking week, the day, the hour, on how someone views you. So if you don't have that well-established,
one comment and then it's gone.
Yeah, one comment and you're fucked. Somebody likes your post, but then somebody was like, oh my God, did they gain weight? Gone.
Yeah.
Right? Oh my God, that's stupid. Or, oh my God, what are they doing? And then it's gone and so, yeah, that's another thing is that I think that self-work where you recognize that validation is only internal, can only really sustainably, I should say. Yeah, it's lovely when the people you love build you up, and they should, right? They should always build you up. However, the only sustainable source of that is you, right? And how you view yourself. So, yeah, no, I mean, I agree. And so you're not going to get that in social media, right? Like, it's absolutely a fucking shit show out there, right? I don't know. And I think maybe, was that something that is validation something that you feel is even harder to attain within the queer community because of the different sort of layers that you have to break through when it comes to like self-knowledge?
I think it's weird because even though you do go through a lot by yourself, and there's a lot of periods of loneliness, I think, and I want to say, I don't know, I hope some people might correct me if I'm wrong, but the queer community does go through a lot of periods where, like, I don't want to say we constantly seek validation, but we do to some extent. Because there's most definitely this culture of, like, belonging with the community. And so, like, easy example that I can put is, like, the new Beyonce album, right? And so, like, all the gays were going crazy, and all the gays started posting, like, their little cowboy boots and hat and whatnot. And, like, they were all cowboys out of nowhere, you know? So, like, that's some sort of seeking validation from others where you, like, start feeding into these trends to seek validation, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Right. So I think I don't think that because of what we go through by ourselves that we, you know, are easier to self-validate, but I think it's quite the opposite. It's more of a consistently seeking to fit in and seeking that group of validation, whatever. I think for me, I just gave up on that shit. Like, yeah, who wouldn't want to be fit in and have, like, true gay friends to kiki with and whatnot? But at the end of the day, I'm tired. I don't have the energy for that. You know?
Yeah. I agree. I think, I think, that's the thing, you and I have been friends long enough that you've seen me move people out of my life that we shared as friends, right? That I felt that exhaustion too of being like, dude, this does not need to be this fucking hard, right?
Right.
And, like, I shouldn't need to convince you of like who I am as a person, because I feel like we've been friends long enough that you've seen it. So it's very weird.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think you're right. I think that exhaustion is pretty universal. You're right. I would say, like, it's like, dude, come on,
Yeah.
But also, like, this, again, like, it's literally being called by healthcare professionals like a loneliness epidemic, right? Like, it's an actual issue. And so, in response to this problem, the U.S. Surgeon General has put out 6 foundational pillars to address the loneliness epidemic. And one of them is strengthening social infrastructure, which includes things like parks and libraries, as well as public programs. And this is a very interesting thing because the loneliness epidemic at the moment appears to be a uniquely American problem. And this is why. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the societal, and this structure was put forth by a group of social psychologists in the 80s. And they called it the third place. So as human beings, we always have first and secondary places. So our first place is home. Our second place is work, right? So those are our 2, like, primary spaces. And then people have a third space where they go to hang out, talk, converse, connect with other human beings. But the trick with that third place is that this place isn't accessible only if you have money or, public transportation or anything like that. The thing is, most European countries have a myriad of third places. They have parks, they have, town squares in very walkable cities where you can go and literally sit down and just chill and talk to someone. In the United States, unfortunately, most of our third places require an exchange of money.
Oh, yeah.
And so in the current economic situation that a lot of people find themselves in, accessing a third place is literally a choice between their bills and going to this third place. Mm-hmm. So we don't, as an American society, having this third place to go to is not something that we are used to and is not something that is baked into our society like most European countries.
Right.
So there's a huge issue there too, that we don't have anywhere to go unless we can pay to hang out there for a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's also a very cultural thing where, like, and I'm just thinking of, like, places that I've lived, like, for example, New York, that even though it's a melting pot of, like, cultures and whatnot, you can absolutely tell how, not blind, but just how detached we are to the whole human interaction.
Oh, yeah?
Because even though, you have, like, and I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, New York is a very touristy area. Yeah. Obviously, the locals are like, more people. But I remember, because you have Central Park. That's the main thing that I can think of. It's completely free and it's massive. But you don't see much of that, like, safe space to interact with people, like that third space that you were talking about. Yeah. I don't see much of that there either. And it's because of that. I think it's a cultural thing where in the US, we don't want to be bothered.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like, 100%. We block ourselves to that third space,
Right. No, 100%. 100%. I think, I think that's key. And it's difficult for folks to get there, Like, I think, we've talked about it. I've been pretty open about my mental health on the pod, and, like, severe anxiety is something that I've always dealt with, but recently it's been depression, which I think I mentioned, like, I'm not really used to. I'm like, what is this? I've got a case of the SADS. But, it's interesting. So one of the things that, like, as I was evaluating it was like, literally, like, do I ever leave my bubble? Ever? I don't. Very rarely, right? And I think to a certain degree, I'm like, oh, I see what people are talking about, right? Because, like, again, I love my own company, but unfortunately, I'm still a victim to my own biology, right? Like, I'm still a human being. So, unfortunately, I'm not a Star Trek character, I can't just be all logic all the time. So it's difficult to maneuver, and honestly, I think sometimes it's hard to realize when you are lonely and when you are sad. Like, I think it is. I think maybe a lot of us are like, oh, this is normal. Like, this is my new baseline, right? Like,
yeah. And I think going back to, like, one of the previous episodes, it's all about self-reflection. And I think we don't, I don't want to say we don't take the time, but we don't have the time to, like...
We don't have time.
Yeah, we don't have the time to, like, sit down, self-reflect, and be like, okay, this is what I'm feeling, this is what it is. And it's called loneliness,
Yeah.
Or, like, depression. Same thing with depression. Like, you have to, like, really take time to analyze how you're feeling and then come to the conclusion that this is what it is,
100%. 100%. So one of the things that with this research that I found a little bit controversial, or, like, at least a little bit irritating, is, you know, the researcher says that this isn't a uniquely American problem, but instead a feature of modern life around the world. Yet he noted that in the US, participation in community organizations, specifically from faith groups to recreational leagues, has declined in recent decades. So we're seeing more forces, this is a quote, he says, so we're seeing more forces that take us away from one another and fewer of the forces that used to bring us together. Mm-hmm. Now, this is where I get a little bit prickly, because I'm like, yeah, I wonder why people aren't going to church, sir. Especially our people, right? Our community, right. The people we're speaking to right now. I wonder why they're not going to fucking church, sir.
Right.
Because it's so friendly and nice over there. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it's like, yeah, there is a lot of things that we, like you said, self-reflection and be like, what the fuck am I doing that isn't helping me, that isn't serving me? What is it? But also, yeah, the situation in the world is difficult at best right now. Right. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that people don't want to go to fucking church right now, bro. You know what I mean? It's just, that's where I get a little, and that's my bias.
It is, yeah. As I'm hearing you, I'm like, I do agree with you, but also, like, I think it was kind of just one of those things where he's just listing things, because I don't think that's a suggestion either.
See? Don't, you're right. Like I said, that's my bias. Okay?
Because also, I mean, I have, I don't know, people for some reason too tend to have or feel a safe space in, you know, their religious community when they go to churches or whatever. And I have heard of a lot of people that transition from one church to another. Just great for them.
Yeah.
I mean, I do wonder, however, there must be some research on it to see if that helps with loneliness, or is it just a cover?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
How do you deal with loneliness, like you personally? Maybe we should take a break and then come back with that, because I feel like it's a loaded question.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I don't know that I do deal with it. So, yeah, right. Let's take a quick break and then let's talk about strategies to deal with loneliness. Yes. Yeah? Okay, we'll be right back. All right, guys, so we are back again to wrap up our episode on loneliness and the loneliness epidemic. So before the break, Florence asked a very pointed question of me, which I don't know that I still have the answer for.
That's true, wouldn't even think about it.
But he asked, how do you deal with loneliness? And I think, honestly, recognizing loneliness is like step number one. Because if you ever ask me, Zuki, are you lonely? I'd be like, no, the fuck? I have me and I'm super fun. Why would I ever be lonely? Right. Which is not, again, like that's a defense mechanism. Like, no, right. Half the time, like I'm in my own company and I'm like, bitch, get a fucking hold of yourself. You know what I mean? But like, you know, it's interesting. I think with dealing with loneliness, step number one is recognizing that you're lonely.
Yeah, I think that it can be applied to anything, like, you know, depression, loneliness, addictions, like acknowledging there's a problem.
Acknowledging there's a problem. And
let me rephrase that, because I don't think loneliness is a problem.
No, that's great. Yes, please expand on that.
So acknowledging there is something going on.
Something going on. Yeah, something to work on, something to make better, right? Yeah. Like simple. Yeah, I think, again, going back to something I mentioned earlier in the episode, where I've never really been able to pinpoint depression in my life. And recently, I'm 31. So recently, that's been something that I've known the feeling, been able to recognize that very specific feeling. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what that is. And I think that helps in recognizing that I'm in a different space mentally and emotionally where I'm going to need a little bit more, right? I'm going to need a little bit more from me, and I'm going to need a little bit more from the folks that love me, right? Yeah. And so I think that is key. Like, I think the minute you're able to verbalize that you feel a gap, just a gap. It doesn't have to be this sort of gaping chasm in your soul. Just kind of like, I just need a little bit more. Like, I need to have like a quick check-in with a trusted person a couple, times a week and just say, hey, this is what's going on in my life, blah, blah, blah. I think that's one way to deal with it, is that recognizing that you just might need a little bit more. And again, I go back to that Elise Myers things that I've said several times on this podcast. Like, if I'm too much, then go find less, right? Like, you're not too much. You're not. You're a human being. And so whatever it is that you're experiencing and feeling that is making you feel this way, like, verbalize it. There we go. I guess that's tip number 1 for me. Please verbalize it, right? Like, that's key for me. The minute I'm able to say it out loud, Fonzie, I'm like, okay, it's real. It's real.
Yeah. That's very interesting, because for me, and you know this, like, I deal with my emotions, like, I typically do it by myself. Like, I'm not a person to vocalize or verbalize what I'm going through or feeling. So with me, when I'm dealing with loneliness, I think for me, it's more of a pulling myself back, grounding myself, like, obviously acknowledging that there is that feeling of loneliness, and then turning that loneliness into art, if you may, because that's when I get really creative. So, like, I will start sort of venting that loneliness onto paper or onto fabric or onto whatever. So I guess for me, my advice would be to cope with loneliness, find something you love.
Yeah, 100%. And I think so. Really quickly, I think this is so important. Literally what you just said, this is what they found in their research. We have to remember that there is a physical effect of loneliness on the body. Johns Hopkins says a broken heart is both a physical and a social diagnosis. When you are alone and disconnected, there's more stress, there's more inflammation, there's more anxiety. And that has effects not only on the body, but the ways in which we see each other in community and feel connected to one another. The longer a person is disconnected, the easier it is for them to stop believing that others have their interests in mind, or that it is possible to find a common cause. So even if you are not a person like Fonz, for example, that can verbalize the struggle, but you are a person that can channel it into your passions and your interests, like art. Socialize that. Socialize your art so that then you can find connection. That's the thing. And I think that's so important. They say so much of the challenge that we have right now is far upstream of electoral politics and policy. It is a culture problem. That's why we think one of the things that's so important about the Surgeon General's report is creating a culture of connection. And it's what we've said this entire episode, right? Like, we need to find a way to, however, whether it be if you're someone like me that needs to verbalize things for them to be real, if you're someone like Fonz that relies on their artistic instincts to express what they're feeling, whatever it is, that has to be socialized in a way that you can find folks that understand you, because you do need to connect with people, right? So that you're not alone. And I want to make it super clear, like now with both of us being like keeping an eye on our social media, if you have anything to talk about, DM us.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned this
Send
throughout
us a direct message.
our entire life on this podcast. We're here.
Yeah. We're here. Like literally, like, right? Like we're not, and I guess, yeah, you could argue this is a parasocial relationship, sure. But when it comes to connection, if you come to us and you're like, hey, Zuki, Fawns, like this is it, no one's ever going to publicize anything that you come to tell us in DMs, right? Like that's never going to happen. So if you ever feel like, hey, you know what? Some of the, nonsense that Zuki and Fawns say on this podcast kind of, resonates with me. Drop us a DM if you're feeling especially isolated and alone. Because I guarantee you, we both come from a very varied background. We probably have felt or experienced something along the lines of what you've dealt with, right? So,
this is a dark, I guess, segment that I'm walking into. But how do you feel about loneliness as a grieving process?
Ooh. Oh wow.
Yeah, that's why I was like, do I want to open that?
No, you should. Yeah, let's fucking open it all. Mention it all. If you're a Real Housewives of New York fan, you know who just said that. But shout out to Ramona Singer. Yeah, mention it all. No, grief. Grief is a funny friend. Grief is a funny thing. In my personal experience, it's funny. I have grieved more for people that are still alive than people that have died.
See, that's why I said grieving, because it's any kind of loss.
Any kind of loss. Any loss.
Right.
Yeah. I will say, when I have withdrawn into my grief, when I have made it something that only I knew, it took me, I would say, 3 times longer to get to a place of peace and letting go than it did when I shared my grief with people that I trusted. I think the thing about grief is that we feel that no one should be burdened with it. We don't want to burden anyone with things as heavy as grief. And that's fair. If you worry about burdening someone with your grief, it means you're an empathetic and caring person. And that's lovely.
Right.
But the thing about being empathetic and caring sometimes is that it can get really lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can get really lonely. And grief itself is lonely.
Yeah.
So share your grief, because grief is beautiful. Because the thing about grief is, people say this is a cheesy quote, but I love this quote. It's grief is love with no place to go. That's grief. You have so many emotions about a person, a thing, an event, a time in your life, and you don't have anywhere to spill it to because it's gone, whatever it was. So all this emotion has nowhere to go. Share it. Even if it means sitting down and writing it down, reading it to someone, posting it on Medium, and whatever it may be, do it. Because you're going to find so many people that are like, yeah, I get it. Been there. And all of a sudden, you're not alone. And your grief has somewhere to go. Yeah. Somewhere to share it to. Yeah, I think If I've learned a lesson, Fonzie, it has been to share grief instead of keeping
Would
it
you say
bottled up.
that loneliness always leads to depression?
Yes.
You
Yes.
think so?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
I beg to differ.
Tell me.
Because I think just going back to like my experiences, you know, and growing up,
Sure.
like feeling
Sure.
lonely at some points and stuff like that. Like especially when I was in that period of like coming out and learning whether to trust people or not enough to tell them. I there were periods of loneliness, and I don't think I don't want to say I allowed myself because that sounds selfish, but I don't think it led to depression because
Okay.
it was just a loneliness of like maybe like you expressed it right now, that feeling of like didn't know where to put it, you know, didn't know where to vent to
Yeah.
or whatever. So that was the kind of
Yeah.
loneliness, and I don't think it ever led to feeling depressed because for me, depression is very like linked to sadness, and I don't think loneliness has to be sad, you know.
No, but
Yeah,
neither
it's
does
more of a
depression,
void.
though.
Correct. So it's more of a
Yeah.
void that I don't know. For me, it just didn't translate into depression.
No, sure. You're like you're what you're saying is the label doesn't necessarily always transfer, is what you're saying.
Right.
Like,
Or the
yeah,
feelings.
yeah.
I don't think the feeling of depression and
Okay.
loneliness are
Yeah.
linked. Yeah.
No, absolutely. No. I think that's absolutely fair. And actually, once again, this goes straight in what you just said. So this is the last statement I want to share with you guys on the research. Per the Surgeon General, he says, some people react to loneliness by withdrawing and getting quiet. Others react to loneliness by becoming irritable and angry, and they may lash out more. That's why sometimes it takes a little time to reflect on what's happening in our life. And sometimes we need somebody else to tell us, hey, you've been withdrawing more, to help us understand that we might actually be dealing with loneliness. So, I think that's key. I think you just hit on a key thing is that we all deal with things vastly differently, right? Like we're very, very diverse individuals. And so, yeah, sometimes, loneliness might not necessarily translate into depression for you, but it is something that is worth you acknowledging, right? Like, oh, you
Oh
know
yeah,
what?
for sure.
I
Yeah.
need some human interaction, some, whatever. Because that's the thing, like, um, maybe this is like a retail worker trauma, maybe a little bit, but like when I think of like when I'm like, okay, I have to like just errands, like just keeping up with life, right? I'm like, can I get it delivered instead of going to the grocery store, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, getting it delivered carries its own amount of privilege, but I'm like, I just don't want to go into the store. And when I catch myself doing that, I'm like, why? Why, Zuki? Why don't you want to go to the store? And literally half the time it's like, I don't want to interact with humans.
Yep.
And then I'm like, that's not good enough, sis. No, no, no. Because as much as I have this dread about dealing with other people, I'm really good at it. I'm really good at interacting with human beings. I am. And 9 times out of 10, as much as I dreaded going out of my house, when I come back, I'm happy I did. So I know. It's kind of like when people say like, just do the workout, you'll feel better afterwards. You do.
Right.
You hate the before part. You do.
Right. Yeah.
It's so fucking annoying, right? oh, I don't want to fucking do this. And then you're doing it and you're still kind of hating it, but you're already there. So fuck it. Just keep going, you know?
Right.
And then afterwards you're like, I did it. It's the same. That's the same process that I go through with leaving my house. That's it. Every time. Because every time I come back, I'm like, that was cool. Fine. That was great. And again, it's not like every interaction was positive. You know,
right.
I live in an area where a lot of older people live. So it's like boomer fucking city. Okay. And we all know about fucking boomer behavior. So not great. But I would say, honestly, 95% of my interactions are positive. And I don't remember that until I push myself to be out there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I again, that's my biggest advice and takeaway for you guys when it comes to being lonely. We have to try, guys.
That's a good point, too. Pushing through loneliness is like just going out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. 100%. And I think that's, you know, yeah. No. It's a huge part. It's like, it's just pushing. Like, no, I can do this. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's been fine. Right? So while the world is shit, while the social, political, economic situation is garbage, you aren't garbage. What you bring to the world isn't garbage. So if you find the wherewithal to just push a little bit, right? And either talk to someone, post your poem, or post your bitch sesh on fucking Medium or any other, I don't know what the Gen Zers are using to post their thoughts on. I'm a millennial, so Medium it is. Remember when we used to have Tumblr and then porn got in it? Ugh, it was a whole thing. Anyways, but yeah, so whatever it is, share it, because what you have to say matters. It absolutely matters. So that connection, remember, guys, community. Just because you get likes on social media doesn't mean shit. You have to have connection with people. You have to connect with people. And for that to happen, you sometimes got to tell them some really, personal shit,
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to have a person that you talk to about your hemorrhoids. Fonts.
Your bowel movements.
Yeah, you have to talk. I don't call hemorrhoids, I call them hemis because it's cuter. You have to have someone that you talk to about your hemis,
Right.
and why your mom is pissing you off that week. You do. Mm-hmm. And if there's not someone immediate in your life right now that is there, Instagram DMs are there. And so are TikTok messages. You can reach out to us and tell us that your mom is being an absolute asshole, or your boyfriend, or whatever. Because we don't want to contribute to the loneliness epidemic, right?
Right.
Yeah. We want to.
Even, I think, even if you're listening to this and this helps, then more power.
Right? Yeah.
So definitely reach out. We're here.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's key, because I think because the world continues to go to hell in a handbasket, our ability to connect to each other as humans is even more paramount than it has ever been.
Yeah.
We need to remember.
It's absolutely harder, but yeah, you're right. Crucial.
Yeah, what do you think makes it harder?
I think it has to do. I think it has to do a lot with us readjusting to life post pandemic. I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
And also just like, our society as a whole is changing. Because I think, I could be wrong, but since the pandemic, I think social media grew a lot more, and that's where our detachment came from. And we got so comfortable and used to being inside that we learned how to dissociate from those connections, from those people, from that human interaction. And so now we're kind of struggling to go back into learning how to be human, I guess.
Yeah, we forgot how to human.
Yeah.
We did. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a lovely closing thought. Like, I think for me, the loneliness epidemic is real. There are people with very important job titles tracking how lonely we are and how that affects the world. But I think most importantly, there are people that genuinely care, and are just as lonely and lost as you are.
Right.
So we might as well be open about our experience, and we might as well be vulnerable, as hard as that may be, about our experience at once again remembering how to human
Right.
in a post-pandemic pre-World War III world. Yeah. So I think that while the world is difficult and unpredictable, we still have to do our part.
Yeah.
And part of doing our part is recognizing the things that we need and then putting ourselves out there to get the things that we need. Yeah. I think
agree.
that's key.
My closing statement for sure is what you just mentioned. Acknowledge that you're lonely. You know.
Yeah.
You said vocalize it. I said vent it out.
Mm-hmm.
One or the other, you're actually putting it out there. So
yeah,
acknowledge, put it out there, and then go out of your comfort zone.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Literally, yeah. Yes. Even if it means just saying one more sentence to the barista when you go to a coffee shop. Do that. You know?
I don't know if I told you this. I know we're extending this a little bit more, but
please tell me.
The one day I went, I think it was a restaurant or a store, I can't remember really, but anyway, the cashier, instead of saying have a good day or have a blessed day, the person said have a lucky day. And then that completely like switched my day because I was like, oh, thank you. That was weird. You know? So just do that.
So lovely.
Get out of your comfort zone and just put it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's funny that they said have a lucky day. So in Virginia, there was like the lottery, like the Mega Millions lottery. Mm-hmm. Okay. And a woman went in there to buy a Mega Millions ticket. And you know how everything is like digital now, right? So she's like buying it and she accidentally hit the Powerball button instead of the Mega Millions button. And so she hit the Powerball button. She's like, damn it. Like I hit the wrong button. And then she won $1 million because she hit the wrong button.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, have a lucky fucking day.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's pure luck. Yeah. She was a mathematical anomaly and she won $1 million. Isn't that fun?
Insane. Yeah.
Yeah. So I loved that story because she talks about being very upset that she hit the wrong button and she couldn't go back and fix it. And then she won $1 million. So, hey, again, have a lucky day.
Have a lucky day, indeed.
Have a lucky day, guys. Yeah. And if you have any thoughts on the loneliness epidemic, please let us know. We'll be posting this. So we are switching our posting schedule from Friday to Mondays. So you're going to start your week with us as opposed to ending your week with us. We're super happy about that change. It works better for our new schedule and like our new sort of like, structure. So we're going to be posting on Mondays, which is exciting. And then let us know, because like we said, episode 50 is coming up and we would love to dedicate it to you guys, and any questions that you may have, anything that you want us to talk about, want to make it big. So yeah.
Maybe we'll do a Q&A in a little Am I a Asshole?
Ooh,
maybe.
I know.
Maybe
They
we'll throw
those.
something new out there. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, guys. So let us know what you think. Yeah, and until next time, this has been General Query. Bye, guys. Bye.